It's June 8th, 2025, and we're looking at the sites where I did cutting for goutweed or bishopweed, same plant, just two different names for it, control over the past 2 summers. However, this year I'm not going to be cutting it again. I think that it's kind of important to see what happens after the cutting ceases, because my goal isn't to continuously cut for goutweed control. I kind of already know that that works with our lawn, where we cut in. While there's a little bit of creeping in of goutweed right on the edge, it largely, if you have a wide enough spot, it keeps it from getting all the way across. So I kind of know that, but my goal would be, if I was doing this on a larger scale, like being able to cut for several years, and I doubt 2 years would be enough, and then be able to leave it and no more goutweed in that area, or maybe just a little bit that you have to be watchful on. So looking at these plots, these ones which I cut weekly, there's a little bit of difference. There's the bed straw in this front one, which was the one I was using the weed whacker on, and not really any of it in the plot I was sizing, just a little bit, but a lot less. And in both of these plots, I'm not really seeing any of the goutweed. It's like there's a little bit around the edges, but that's clearly coming in. And so that's pretty encouraging. And so it seems to have worked to eradicate it in these areas. But kind of the other part of this is that the grass here is like really a different species, I think. And maybe it's shorter than it is in other spots, but it's this very kind of singular species, or really there's 2 species of grass in here, as opposed to probably 3 or 4 other species in kind of the mix of grass in the surrounding area, which has goutweed coming up through it. These 2 plots were kind of ones I didn't do any, and you see some of the goutweed coming up reasonably strong in here. And these had, I thought, too little goutweed to do a proper control compared to the other ones. So it's really good to see that seemed to have worked. And then these 2 plots, which were the ones I was cutting bi-weekly by weed whacker and scythe, look pretty similar. The grass seems to be a little bit healthier here, but not enough for me to determinately say that, though there is more of a mix of the species of grass. It's not entirely just those 2 species. There's really 4 different species I'm seeing in here. This one, which I cut occasionally, while there is some grass still in it, most of the grass is no longer there, and the goutweed is still fairly prevalent, along with the kind of the same, maybe it's a little bit less than the surrounding goutweed, but there's nothing to kind of suppress it like the grass is in the surrounding area. So far that seems like a very not good choice. Here at the site, which I've been cutting for 3 years, and I should note it had a much heavier like goutweed load than that field site over there, and kind of a much more mix of different kind of wetlandy and just kind of other like wild species, because it wasn't as kind of maintained with fields over the years, kind of more meadowy species rather than a field species mix. And here I am seeing more goutweed, just a couple small parts in here. Let me see if I can find any. I looked at here earlier. Yeah, like there's one right here, kind of right in the middle. There's a couple more small ones. So it hasn't completely eradicated it, but it is looking much better than the areas around over here, like in the control plot, and just the other areas where you have big masses of goutweed at this time. I think as some of those meadow plants grow up, it gets a little bit overshadowed later in the year. But it does seem to be working, at least at this point. But in this spot, 3 years wasn't enough to eradicate it. Now at the end of October, doing an examination of these treatment sites, what am I seeing? So, like, you can see there's some goutweed here, but that is, well, off the edge of this treatment area. I'm not seeing any in this spot that I did the heavy treatment on for 2 years. If we go back into this kind of control, but not enough gout weed to make it worthwhile to, or wasn't equal amount. There is a little bit here. So kind of shows me why I wasn't doing it, because there's only a couple when I started. And this one, not really seeing any. Getting into these, again, these were the every other week treatment for 2 years. Again, not really seeing anything. And this was the occasional, which definitely through the summer I was seeing a decent amount. And yeah, there's definitely some visible here. And I'm not doing a go through inch by inch to see if I've completely eradicated it, but from these results, at least for one summer, and the control actually appears to have more than that occasional, but they were reasonably similar earlier, I remember. Seems to be that shows that this cutting is working to a degree to keep the gout weed back, at least in this kind of lower density of it and in the field plot. Here at the more wild area plot, which I did for 3 years, there's definitely gout weed. This definitely had a higher amount of it than the field plot to start with, even in this treatment area. There's definitely some gout weed here, and who knows if it's the kind of the species or just that it was not very well established in that field plot, and it was much more established here. And I don't think I ever got the level of removal here that I observed over in the field, so it wasn't as ready to test this out, I would say. I think what this is showing is that there is some potential in kind of a short cutting to eliminate gout weed from an area. I still don't know long term if that is able to keep it out of there after you stop cutting it, because, well, it did grow into these areas at some point, so I'd expect it to grow back. And I think a lot of the reason why I thought this would work, both because I know that mowing our lawn, we're able to keep gout weed at bay. Sometimes it creeps into the first foot or two of the lawn, and we had one path that was maybe barely 2 feet wide that it was eventually, after several years, able to cross. But it's not growing well in our lawn grass that it abuts right up against. So I'm not surprised that the grass is able to keep it at bay. And also, my understanding is that grass evolved to be eaten by grazing animals, so is able to handle short cutting in a way that many other plants are not able to, which in some sense might be why the gout weed is not as dense here in the field, and then I'd say is not coming back as well, and just that while I was running the experiment, the grass was able to outcompete it, whereas over kind of in the more wild area with a lot more wetland plants and just a variety of different plants that my understanding are not as evolved to that continuous grazing, those weren't able to do as well during my experiment, and so weren't able to keep the gout weed down in the same way grass was.